The richness I achieve comes from nature, the source of my inspiration. Claude Monet. This is The Artful Painter, art lessons for artists, collectors, and people who love art. Kyle Buckland's bold paintings are deeply rooted in the philosophy and approach of the impressionists. As a teenager, his interest in art began to edge out the interest of most youth, such as skateboarding, team sports, or playing in a band. He became an art nerd in high school, using every available moment to devour the small selection of art books he found in his school library. He didn't just read books, though. He went outside and painted, and painted, and painted. That hard work paid off. Kyle has won many awards for his impressionistic paintings. His work is represented in hundreds of private, public, and corporate collections around the world. His paintings are filled with rich color and luxurious brushwork. Surprisingly, some of his largest works are painted outdoors. Kyle captures the experience of painting outside on his inspirational YouTube channel he calls The Artful Souls. There you can watch him paint on canvases measuring up to 48 by 48 inches, or about 121 centimeters square. Kyle now resides in a small 19th century farmhouse in Abington, Virginia, along with his lovely wife, Jennifer. However, if you knock on his door, you probably won't find him home. He's probably painting either out back in his standalone studio or somewhere out in the beautiful Virginia countryside. One thing is for sure, though, wherever you find Kyle Buckland, whether he's painting outdoors or in his studio, or teaching a class of eager students, you can be certain he is making a difference. My name is Carl Olson, and this is The Artful Painter. Is that your studio space?
It is. Yep. Yeah, I have a building, sort of an outer building in the backyard that I've outfitted with electric and water and insulated it, and it's my own little safe space here.
Nice. So you have a very long commute to get into your
Yeah, it's like it took a while to figure out that perfect balance. I've had studios. I've had a studio in my house. I've had studios that were on the other side of town, and it was like, when your studio's in your house, your art's always there, and it's always kind of looming over your shoulder if you've got something you have to work on. So I was like, oh yeah, I need it to be outside of the house a little bit. But then again, if you get up and you want to work on something, you don't want to have to drive all the way across town. For me, I found that to be a little bit of a problem. So I said, well, if I can just make it about 100 yards, a football field away from the house, so I can get out of bed and just roll down here if I want to.
Nice. And where is home?
Abingdon, Virginia. So in the southwestern tip of Virginia, almost into Tennessee.
Oh, nice. That's beautiful country. I've been through that area. Yeah.
It is. Yeah. It's just south of the Shenandoah Valley if you're traveling 81 down Virginia, and it's the Appalachian Mountains, Appalachian region of the southern Appalachian Mountains, and it's just gorgeous here. I mean, it's the reason I became a landscape painter, I'd say.
Because of the landscape there in Virginia.
Yeah, it was a contrast from where I was born, which we can go into that later. But I was born in the city in Wilmington, Delaware, right outside of Philadelphia, about 30 minutes out of Philly, and moved down here when I was 12. So it was like a whole different world, and we had family down here, so we would come and visit, and the landscape had such an impression on me at such a young age because it was so different than what I was used to growing up in the concrete jungle, so to speak. And then to get out here and see these mountains and the Skyline Drive down the Blue Ridge through the Shenandoah, coming down to visit family. It was just, ever since I can remember, it was just a magical part of my experience. And I think that's why I was so drawn, when I started painting, I was so drawn to capturing this landscape.
Yeah, that's a extraordinarily beautiful drive there through that I think my wife and I, we did it about 7 years ago. We drove. That's the last time I've been through that area. I would love to go back. Of course, we're all sequestered at this moment, so I don't do a lot of traveling now, but I would love to go back to that area. It's beautiful.
It'll be fun when things get back to normal to get out and visit, especially some of those places where we said we were going to go, but didn't get a chance to actually get out and really explore. So I think everybody will be looking forward to getting out and exploring soon.
Can't wait. I'm getting tired of my backyard.
Yeah, exactly.
Though my backyard's okay. It's okay. It's good to learn, work with limitations that we have. So.
I always considered myself an introvert, but now I'm like, maybe I'm not as much of an introvert as I thought, because after 10 months of being extremely introverted, I'm ready to get out and talk to people again. So
one of the things that drew me to your art, well, there's a couple of things. So one, you have a YouTube channel. I think that's how I discovered you initially. I'm not sure. Maybe it might have been on Instagram. I don't know, but you have a name that means a lot to me. You call yourself the Artful Souls. So I thought, well, we got something in common there. Artful Painter meets Artful Souls.
Yeah, I thought that was neat when I started listening to the podcast. I was like, oh, this is a good name for a podcast.
Well, it's coincident, but a happy one. So I appreciate that. And the other thing is, you paint big when you go outside and paint, and I think I'm struggling with a 9x12 as my biggest paint. And here you are with 48 by 48 inch canvases out in the billowing wind and elements, and you're producing these beautiful paintings outdoors. I think that's amazing.
I appreciate that. Yeah, a lot of my heroes were, when I started painting when I was about 14 or 15, and a lot of my heroes from back in the day were, the early impressionists, and not just the French impressionists like Monet and Renoir and Pissarro, but also the more American impressionism. So if you look at painters like Edward Redfield in Pennsylvania, he was, it was his thing. He would take a 50 by 56 out, and they said he would strap the canvas to his back and march out in the snow and set up these huge canvases and paint all day long on a giant canvas and bring it home. And so growing up, looking up to those artists, it just made sense to me that it didn't, plein air painting didn't have to equate to small painting, that it could be done on a large scale too. And so I've tried to embrace that and tried to bring big canvases out in the field when I could.
Is that something you started early in your outdoor painting experience?
When I first started, it was more small canvases, medium size, maybe 16 by 20 or 18 by 24. I painted a lot outside when I first started painting. It was, to me, and I tell this, and it sounds like a joke, but really for a while, I didn't know that painters painted landscapes inside. I think because when I was like 14 or 15, I started studying all this impressionism, and it was like, I saw, every painter that I admired took their canvases outside and painted, starting with Claude Monet and them. So it was like, it never really occurred to me to set up inside. But I did have to contain my art world because I was at my parents' house and I had a little space in the basement, so I couldn't paint the big 4-foot by 5-foot paintings outside. So I started small and then kind of worked my way up to it. But when I was 21, I worked for a theater. When I was 21 and 22 for a couple of years and started painting scenic art and we were doing 40-foot by 20-foot backdrops. So that sort of changed my look on what was big too. It changed my perception of scale. It really taught me to be able to think, on a big scale. So then after painting those large backdrops, which we would actually paint them on the floor, we'd lay them down and use brushes that were in the ends of bamboo sticks to paint. And then we'd climb on top of the ladder and look through a looking glass, but through reverse to see the painting from far away. It's a whole different, mindset of painting. And then after doing those backdrops, it was like, taking a 36 by 48 out seemed like nothing. So,
well, you have a little something in common with Edgar Payne. He and his wife, early in their career, did the theater backdrops. Yeah,
there's there were several artists, and they were really they were really key on design and composition. You take Edgar Payne and you look at how he went into breaking down the shapes in the landscape and using them to design the abstract elements first. I think that comes from maybe that scenic art background. Another favorite artist of mine is Frank Brangwin, who was an English painter, and he was also a scenic artist and a scenic designer. And his work is very tightly designed and very design oriented. And I think that's because as a scenic artist, you're trained to look at all the elements of the stage and to make your element work with everything else that's going on in the stage. So I think when you take that knowledge to easel painting, then it really translates well, because you're aware of how every shape is going to change every other shape on the canvas.
Right. So does that mean, so when you do those theater paintings, they're obviously large. Is that a team effort, or is that something you're doing by yourself?
It was a team effort at the theater that I worked at. I know some theaters have one scenic artist. I was actually an assistant to the head scenic artist there, so we were a team of two. And sometimes you'd be given a whole backdrop to do by yourself, while the other artist was working on, turning styrofoam into old rocks and rusted metal and just all sorts of stuff. So you never knew what you were going to be getting into. Each day was different. We'd go in and do different things. And
I know this is a question a lot of artists don't like to hear. How long did it take you? But I am curious about that process of doing theater painting. Was that something that you had to do on a quick deadline, or were you given a couple of weeks or a month or so to do?
Usually it was, we had a deadline, and, the show must go on. And we were always the last stop for the scenery. So it was funny because we were always telling the carpenters who worked in the shop next door, hurry up, get that scenery to us because we got to get it painted. And, a lot of things that were done in the scenery, or in the set design world, in the scenic art world, are done very quickly, and you really can't second guess yourself. You have to make decisions. You get a design from a designer. You have to be able to match the colors, figure out how to get what they envision on a small scale to blow up to a large scale, and you have to do it quickly. Again, there's another great crossover for plein air painting, because when you're outside plein air painting, you definitely have a deadline, because the sun is not going to wait for you, just like the audience at the theater is not going to sit around and wait for the set to show up. So I think having that pressure could help an artist in easel painting and figure out how to cut to the chase and not have to backtrack any.
Yeah, learning how to work with the constraints that you have. And I imagine the other thing is you had to work with a lighting director, or the background had to work with whatever the lighting scheme for theater was.
Yeah, absolutely. It was definitely the epitome of collaboration, because you've got, everybody's an artist at the theater. So yeah, anybody that puts their hand into the production has their own ideas and what they want this to look like. But as a scenic artist, you really are mostly tied to working with the set designers and the director of the play, and you have to be able to quiet that little individual voice in your head that says, no, do it this way, make that color brighter. And you have to be able to understand that you're working just a piece of the larger puzzle, which is the actual play. And so you have to sometimes subdue your artistic expression to match the vision of the designer.
I imagine that would have prepared you well to take on the occasional commission later in your fine art career.
It did, yeah. I think it was good conditioning for that, because there's definitely a correlation there where you have to work with somebody, and you have to understand. I always tell people, I haven't been doing a lot of commissions lately, but I used to say, you're going to have to live with the painting. Once you get it, it's hanging on your wall. So I want you to be happy with it. And so that was one of my main goals when I was doing commissions, was to work with the client and make sure that they were happy with what they were getting. But also at the same time, making sure that they understood my style and my approach to painting, and make sure that that's what they wanted.
Well, I'm really encouraged by the fact that you got started at such a young age.
I did. I started. It's funny. I moved to Virginia when I was 12 with my family, and I went through several different phases, like a lot of youngsters will do. I was skateboarding for a while, and I was in a band, and This lasted from the time I was about 12 to 14, which it seemed like a lifetime back then. I look back, it's like it was only 2 years. And then I was starting to look into my dad's art books. But I grew up around a lot of art. So both my parents are really into art, and my dad in particular had a love for impressionism. So he had collected a number of books on impressionism, and not just French impressionism, but impressionism around the world, British impressionism, Australian art, landscape painting in Australia. We had all these different books, and it was I sort of became disillusioned with the whole social scene at school. When I moved here, like I said, I was in a band, and I was, kind of the popular kid or whatever in middle school. But when I started to get into high school and the end of middle school, I started to want something a little bit more interesting than sort of the facade that I'd put up for the social scene in school. And I started getting into those art books, and it was a weird thing that happened. It was like a switch flipped in my brain, and I became just completely driven to figure out what these artists were doing and how could I do that now. And so by 14 or 15, I was outside after school with these canvases. Had no idea what I was doing. I just had a general concept. My dad is also an artist, so he helped me stretch my first canvas, and he told me, look, you need these colors, and you're gonna have to get turpentine and some linseed oil and mix them into your paint. But as far as instruction, he kind of let me go and do my own thing. And now I think I always say I'm just happy that they were nice enough to tell me that my early paintings were really good. And I think that's maybe what parents are for, is so that they can,
of course.
Just encourage us. They say, oh yeah, that's good. Now go paint some more, keep going. But I tell people, and this is true, I had a deal worked out with my parents where when I got home from school, so this is like in 9th grade, 10th grade, I didn't have to start my homework till after the sun went down, because from that like 3:30 to 5:30 or 6:30, I wanted to have that time to get outside and paint. So it was just after that, I think I remember telling my mom, I said, I've been going through these different phases, playing guitar and skateboarding and doing this and that. I said, but I really like this. I really like this landscape painting. I hope this one sticks. And so here we are, I'm 36 now, so 22 years later, and just like every single day, it's one of the first things that I think of when I wake up, and one of the last things that I think about before I fall asleep is if I tell people, if I'm not painting, I'm learning, or I'm thinking about art, or I'm studying other people's paintings. So.
Well, I was impressed in your bio. You said at age 15 you bought Daniel Wildingstein. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, but
I'm not the best name pronouncer. That's one thing with art history. It's like, what? But yeah, the catalogue raisonné of the Monet series, which had
1,500 pages, 4 volumes.
Oh yeah, and I've still got them. They're on my bookshelf, and the spines are just completely worn off of them. And I would take these books with me to school. I mean, I went from being the popular kid to like that oddball nerdy kid that's the art kid, and I say nerdy, but I mean it with the best intentions. I mean, I was an art nerd, and I carried my I brought a thermos, one of those Stanley thermoses of coffee.
I remember those,
black coffee, and I'd bring that to school with me. And every chance I got, like between classes, I'd have me a little cup of coffee, and I'd be sitting at my locker reading a Monet book or something. So it was, quite the experience. I don't know if the other kids knew quite what to think about me.
Well, did they have art classes and that sort of thing in your school?
Yeah, absolutely. We did. We had I had 4 years of art, and I actually had an art history class, which was like an AP class in 12th grade, which was really, really beneficial. And I had a wonderful art teacher in school, Heidi McElroy. She was the high school art teacher there, and she just she was very she kind of let me do my own thing, because I think she saw that I was on a path, and she would guide me, but then at the same time she would kind of let me take the reins sometimes. And there was even a day in art history class where she let me come up and teach a little section on the French impressionists. That was really neat. actually, the Abingdon High School library had okay. So this is an interesting story, and I'll go ahead and tell you this one because it's really important to the path that I went down as far as becoming a plein air painter and the genre of painting that I'm really interested in. I went into the high school library. So this would have been like 2000, maybe 1999, 2000, ninth grade. I was looking for books on painting, and they didn't have a big selection. Their art selection wasn't great in our library, but they had some old books, and our school was built in the 50s. So they had these books, and there were only like about 10 of them that were purchased when the school was built. They had a list of art books that new schools should purchase. One of those books was Carlson's Guide to Landscape Painting.
Amazing.
Yeah, so I had it and I read it and I didn't understand any of it. I was like, what in the world is this guy saying? But I knew that there was something there. I was like, I got to read this book again. So I read it again in 10th grade. I understood about 20% of it. I was like, okay, I see what this guy's saying. He's teaching me how to paint. And so it was a big thing for me. It was like, I was always getting on the internet because that's back when the internet was fairly new. And it was like, I could do research on these artists. So, the Carlson's Guide to Landscape Painting, it was it didn't have a lot of color reproductions of his work. I had never heard of John Carlson. I was all big into the French Impressionists and the British Impressionists. And I hadn't heard of Carlson. So I got online. I started looking up these paintings. So 11th grade, I took the book out 2 more times. So now I'm reading about Carlson's painting, but I'm also researching, well, who else did Carlson paint like, or who studied with Carlson? Because I started to realize that he was a teacher. So I said, well, who did he teach? Because I love the way that he approached painting trees. I mean, it was like, I felt like that's what trees looked like to me when I went outside, that they looked alive, that they looked like they had personalities, and he just had a way with painting these trees. Well, going from Carlson, I found Emile Groupie. And,
yes.
So that led me to Groupie on painting, brushwork for the oil painter, and the other Groupie on color. So I got this interlibrary loan thing through the community college here, and this is probably 11th or 12th grade. I was getting all these rare art books through the interlibrary loan, so I got the Groupie books, and I was like, oh man, I got to buy these. So I got on eBay and got the Groupie books.
You got them when they were cheap.
Yeah.
they're not cheap anymore.
And it was funny because I had all these old like art books that had that old art book smell, and they had all the black and white reproductions, but the information I was getting from them was so good. I mean, it was so approachable, and it was timeless information because these guys are, they're painters. I mean, like I said, the Groupie, he's taken 30 by 36 canvases out in 2 feet of snow up in Jeffersonville, Vermont, and they were doing what I was wanting to do, or what I was, knew I was called to do. So I was like, I need to really look at these painters, and Groupie had a way that was approachable. I could see what he was doing on the canvas. It was like, things weren't layered up so much that you couldn't tell what was going on. It was a very direct way of painting. So I got these Groupie books, but I don't have the Carlson book. So I'm getting ready to graduate now. It's 12th grade. I go to the library and I said, I got a proposal for you. I went to the librarian. I said, I want to buy the updated version, because there was one of the Carlson books that came out, I think, in the 80s or maybe the 70s.
The
or
Dover
80s,
edition, yeah.
After the 50s edition. I said, I want to buy your library the new edition, and I'll take this old one that was all worn out and everything. They said, are you sure you want the old one? I said, yeah, I want the old one. So they ended up letting me do that. So I ended up with the original Carlson book, and you can still see the library card in it, and you can see all the times that I took it out in 10th grade and 11th grade. And
So when you say the original, are you talking about the one that was published back in the, when was it, like when did it first come out?
No, that one. So this was right after they edited some of it out. But now I actually have a copy. I think mine's from early 40s, or the Elementary Principles of Outdoor Painting, or Elementary Principles of Landscape Painting. So that's the original Carlson book.
So you have that?
Yeah, I just recently purchased it about 6 months ago. I found it. I'd been looking for it, and it was like every time I searched it, it would not be available. And so I just constantly would every now and then just go online and say, oh, does any bookseller have this? Is it on eBay? And I finally found a copy on eBay and got it. So
Can I ask
neat.
you? Can I ask you how much you paid for that book?
Yeah, it wasn't. It was just a little under $100 for
Oh
this.
my goodness! You got a bargain. You got a
Yeah.
bargain. What a
Yeah, that's
wonderful
eBay.
addition to your library.
Yeah, I loved it because it was like, I didn't even realize that existed for a while, and then when I learned about it, I was like, oh well, it's obviously I need to get that because I need to know what the other 20% that they took out was, and so now I've got that, and I also have the edition from my library too, so from the school library.
But you made a deal with the librarian before you graduated to get that.
Yeah. I told them, and they said, "Wait a minute." They said, "You're going to buy us the new version, and you're going to take this old, worn-out version." I said, "Absolutely, I am." Yeah.
You clever guy.
So it meant a lot to me because it really was. I remember reading it the first time and thinking, I have no idea. I was like 14. I read this book. I was like, I have no idea what this guy is saying. But something in me said, you need to read that again. And then, I still pick it up today and get new information out of it, 20 some years later. So I looked at painters that Groupie taught, and I found a painter, Charles Mavalli, who edited the Groupie books. So he worked and helped Groupie write those books. So I was looking at Mavalli's paintings. I was like, man, I found like a lineage of artists here. Well, from Mavalli, I learned that he taught this painter named David Lucier in Connecticut. Well, David Lucier was like, I guess at this time, this is back in 2002. He was in his, he was not an older artist then. I mean, he was in his maybe 40s or late 30s, and he was painting outside. And his wife, Pam, she's also an artist, and he was taking groups of artists to Monhegan Island. So I was just, I was really green then. I didn't know anything about plein air. I didn't even know the word plein air for a while. I was like, when I learned it, somebody's like, oh, you're a plein air painter. I'm like, I'm a what? And they're like, yeah, you paint outside. I was like, oh yeah, that's what I like to do. I paint outside. They said, yeah, it's called plein air painting. So I didn't really know much about the whole plein air movement. It kind of happened outside of what I was doing. And then I finally caught up with it a few years ago when I started doing the plein air events. So it was kind of funny, but I sent an email to David and I said, look, David, I've been following like Carlson's work and Groupie's work and Mavalli, and now I find your work and I love it. And I just want to reach out to you and say how much I appreciate that you're carrying on this tradition of sort of the Cape Ann School of Art and those New England artists and Carlson's teachings. I said, that's really means a lot to me, and it's great to see your paintings. And I sent him some of mine, and he liked what he saw. He said, why don't you come up and hang out with us on Monhegan Island for a week and paint with us? So I got to go up, and I was like 19 years old, and I took a plane. It was like the first time I had left by myself home, and I took a plane up to Maine and then took the ferry out to Monhegan Island and stayed in this little tiny shack called the Trailing U, which had like kerosene lanterns, no electricity. And I got to stay out there and paint for a week with David and Pam Lucier. And it was just a wonderful, eye-opening experience to the magic of being on location, experiencing, intense emotions about the scene that you're seeing, and then translating all that onto canvas. So, and who knows where I would be now if I hadn't gotten that Carlson book out of the library.
I tell you, Kyle, that's the most astonishing story and most inspiring story I've heard about that book. And you discovering it in school, and your logical progression, tracking down, okay, who influenced who benefited from that. And I agree with you. The Groupie book is actually, to me, more accessible than the Carlson book. That's not a knock on the Carlson book, but Groupie had a fun way of describing what Carlson worded in a very academic way. So
and it was it was refreshing because at the time I was trying to wrap my brain around Carlson's and teachings, and I was also like dipping into Thoreau and Emerson and philosophical writers. So like that level of writing was, I wanted to wrap my mind around it, but it was nice to hear, Groupie in his books saying stuff like, just get in there and paint the center of interest and mess up the rest. I mean, he just had a way of like telling people how to do it, and it was very matter of fact. And I kind of appreciated that too. So it's a neat contrast to Carlson's style of teaching.
Well, what a wonderful experience that had to be on Monhegan Island there, in primitive but inspiring conditions. Do you still have paintings from that period?
I do. I have several. Yeah, I sold a bunch. I think I was there for I think I painted for 5 or 6 days and did like 17 paintings. And it was
nice.
it was like every single day I'd wake up like 5 a.m., eat a breakfast, and then head out. And it was just like all day long. And I think there are still some of them in my parents' attic. That's where there's this collection of paintings. And it's like, there's probably 200 paintings in my parents' attic. And I just, every now and then I'll go up there and take a trip through memory lane. And some of them are just awful paintings, but they're fun, to look at. But fortunately, by the time I went to Monhegan, I had about 3 or 4 years of plein air painting under my belt. So I was able to turn out some keepers when I was out there, and just being around other artists and getting to see David and Pam's work firsthand was a great, inspiring experience. And it's Monhegan Island, so I mean, I don't know if you've ever been out there, but it's just I've
not been on the island. I've been to Maine, but not and the coast, but not the island.
You get a chance, take the ferry out there, and even if it's just for the day, take a little pochade box or something, get out there, because it's just, you go back in time and you're in a place where, George Bellows and Rockwell Kent and, Jamie Wyeth, all these painters have painted out there, and some are still out there painting today. I got to go talk to Don Stone at his studio back in the day before he passed away. And he had a studio up there, and he built banjos too. So I thought that was cool. You just walk in, there's artists up there, and they just have their open studio, or they're out painting outside of their studio, and really high caliber painters. And you can just, walk right up to them and talk to them and look at their work. So very inspiring. And like I said, it really set in stone for me the idea that I had to, that this is what I wanted to do, that I would, find a way to make a living and to be able to pursue outdoor painting for the rest of my life. Yeah, I tell people it's never too late to get started, because, in a short amount of time and a little with concerted effort, you can learn the basics to painting. You only need those basics to really get going. And so it's never too late to get started. And once you get those basics down and you get that drive, your work will improve exponentially. So even painters that get started later on in life, I'd say nothing wrong with that. Just go with where you're at and go with what you got and take it and run with it.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got painters that contact me through the Artful Souls, my YouTube channel, and they're some of them are in their 70s and 80s even, and they're painting oil paintings for the first time and just loving it and absolutely enjoying it. Getting out and pushing paint around, and it's like they they didn't know that they had the artist within them, and they just needed that little push in the right direction, and then it sparked that flame that's hard to extinguish once it starts burning.
Well, speaking of your YouTube channel, The Artful Souls, as I mentioned when we first started, that's probably one of the first ways I found out about you. And you have, I haven't watched all the videos. There's quite a few of them out there, and some of them are delightfully long because you really get to see the process. Some of them have there's no talking. You set up this huge canvas and you just start painting. And I love that. I wonder what he's going to do next. I'm peering over your shoulder, and I like that.
Well, thank you. That's what I wanted to create with those videos. To me, it was important just as to share what I do, and to help people realize that these things are approachable, because like we were saying with the groupie book, that's one thing that helped me is realizing that, hey, I can do this. And a lot of times when you're first starting painting, that's all you need is somebody to tell you, you can do this. You're doing it good, but you have to be patient with yourself. And I tell people that when I'm teaching too, is like, allow yourself to paint the goofy paintings, because we all know if we were going to learn to play piano that we're not going to sit down and play Beethoven. or Mozart. We're not going to sit down and just write a big symphony. We have to learn the notes first. But for some reason, that is often overlooked when you sit down to learn painting. People want to be able to paint the masterpieces right away. And so I tell people, just think of it like if you're learning a new instrument. You have to learn the notes, and then you can learn the chords. And that's just then you can start putting together chords to make a song. Then you're ready to start composing and getting more into the philosophical side of things. But allow yourself the time to learn the basics. And so that's what these YouTube videos, and I did a whole series of beginner videos, which if you get on the channel, I've got different playlists, so you can go and watch the beginner videos. And I wanted to sort of demystify some of these processes that for creating paintings outside, because I know a lot of people are becoming more interested in plein air painting now. I wanted my videos to appeal to a large audience and to encourage people that maybe never painted before in their life, and show them that, hey, this is something you could do, and it's something that's good for society. It's good for mental health. It's good for sometimes it's good for mental health, depending on how good your paintings are going. But good for just a whole host of things. Being able to channel creative energy in a positive direction, and so it's been a wonderful experience getting those videos out and hearing people's responses to them.
Yeah, well, I enjoy them. I don't get to consume a whole lot of content because I'm creating it. So
yeah, I understand.
I'm very selective in what I watch, and so yours is one of them. Even though I haven't watched all of them, I have watched quite a few. And
I'm honored, and I'll go ahead and tell people too that if you're watching the videos and you like what you see and you want access to extra content, in the description below, there's a link to my Patreon page, which is patreon.com/Kyle Buckland. And it's just $1 a month. They can sign up to get additional content. So extra demos, some tips. I do quick tips about, technical stuff about washing paintbrushes and using a palette knife, and just all sorts of additional content that's not available on YouTube. So if you make your way through all of the YouTube videos that are free and you want to sign up, and then I also tell people by signing up to become a patron, you're also helping me keep the free videos free too, because that allows me to have time to work on the free videos as well.
You've got several patrons already signed up. I noticed. I checked out your Patreon.
Yeah. They it's been a great experience, and I wanted to keep it affordable because when I first started painting, I was like doing odd jobs and mowing lawns to save up to buy a 150 milliliter tube of white paint. That was like, I was like, I could get it. So I understand about not having, the finances to do this. And I wanted something that was accessible and affordable. And YouTube is great because we can make revenue from YouTube through advertising. So it allows the content to be free for the viewer. But then also the Patreon is an additional way for artists to bring in revenue from people who just want a little bit more and also want to just genuinely support the artist. But I chose just to have $1 a month. It's sort of pay what you can. You can pledge more than $1 a month, but I thought at just $1 a month, it's virtually everybody will be able to have access to that. So that was important to me, to have everything be affordable.
Well, your patrons on Patreon, that's kind of a mouthful to say, but they're your raving fans. They're the ones that, I have those too. And I don't mean that egotistically, but the point I'm trying to make is I have donors who contribute, and they decide how much they contribute to this show. And I'm telling you, it makes a huge difference. And I know not everybody can do that. But whatever they do, it does make a difference. You don't know how. There's sometimes I think, I just don't want to do this anymore. And then you see that donation come in, you say, okay, I've got somebody here that cares about this, and I need to step up my game and fulfill their wish. So
Yeah, and people don't some might not realize sometimes how much effort goes into making a video.
Oh,
They see
yeah.
the finished product, but you got to imagine, especially when you're outdoors and you're painting. Painting outside is tough enough, but then to haul a camera out, to make sure your battery's charged on your camera, to make sure you have your memory card, and set up your tripod and get your camera going, and then that's just half the battle. When you come home, then you got to get into the computer and do the software editing, and it takes time. And I always tell people, this is my sole source of income. Art is, and it has been for a long time. And so, one of the things I tell people is when you're an artist, you have to have different irons and different fires. You have to keep the bills paid and keep the lights on. And I always tell people we keep the dogs and cats fed, and then my wife and I get to eat a little bit too. So
If they only made a cat food that everybody could eat.
yeah.
Well, I think that's nice.
It's a wonderful feeling of gratitude when somebody loves what you do and they want to support you. Same way when someone buys a painting. I mean, that's the ultimate for me. That it means so much, because when they reach out to you and say, "Hey, I connect with this piece. I love what you do, and I want to support you and purchase your art." I mean, that's being a professional artist and knowing that these patrons and collectors are allowing you to pursue your dream. That's just, it really means a lot, because the dream is important. And I always tell people that we're not just messing around here. We're trying to do something or something important, and so it's important to me to have to support that. So
yeah. Well, there's a lot of friction in doing all this other stuff besides just painting. Like you said, setting up the camera. I know your latest demo, which I enjoyed. It's called Forest Sentinel. That was one of your most recent paintings.
Yeah.
So you're deep in the snow, and I'm thinking, not only are you going out there with a French easel and setting up your paint kit, you've got to set up your camera. You got to set up the angle and the audio, everything. You got to get all that set up before you actually start painting. So there's a little bit of friction. I think some artists probably would, not want to do that. But what's the benefit of doing that?
For me, it was being able to share the experience with so many people. And I really didn't understand how many people were going to be experiencing it when I first started doing this, doing the videos in the Artful Souls channel. But now I've got, 11,000 subscribers. People from all around the world are watching these videos. And I have to think about them when I'm going out. And I think, I get these emails from people. I have, some folks in different countries that contact me, and they say, they don't even speak very well much English, some of them, but they just show me. They say, "I've been painting these paintings, and you've changed my life. Your videos have changed my life. I found a new passion, and I'm getting joy from it." And they share these paintings that they're doing, and they're setting up their field, setting up in fields on the other side of the world with their French easels, and they've got my colors laid out, the same palette that I teach with. And it's just, when I go out there, I think about that, and I think, man, I'm making a difference, and it's also getting people to do something that's productive and positive with their life. And so for me, that's the reward, is to know that I'm doing that. And also, there's a learning curve to anything you do. So when I first started doing the videos, it was quite a chore to set up the cameras and make sure that I had everything. But now it's 3 years later, and it goes a little bit more smoothly. I have a checklist in my mind, make sure I've got this, make sure I've got my battery charged. It's almost to the point now where I've done it enough that it's become second nature, just to set up the camera, to get things going, and to be able to teach too. I get enjoyment out of explaining my process. And I think you hear a lot of teachers say this, that when they're teaching, they actually learn themselves about things that they were maybe doing on a subconscious level. And
yeah, I've heard that many times.
Yeah, I think we go on autopilot as artists, and we get in the zone, and we start applying concepts that are sometimes a little esoteric and maybe things that are not very concrete. But then when you're forced to stand in front of an audience or a camera and really kind of nail down what you're doing piece by piece, and trying to explain it to somebody who's maybe just holding a paintbrush for the first time, it forces you to really figure out, well, what is it that you are doing, and why are you doing things this way and that way? So it brings a great feeling knowing that I'm contributing to others, but it also is rewarding in an artistic sense for me to be able to look back at my work and see what it is that I'm doing and how I'm explaining that.
Tell me a little bit about your setup when you record video. What kind of gear are you using to do that?
I've got a Canon handheld video camera that I use for my main
like a camcorder or a DSLR.
Yeah, Canon camcorder, and I've got a Sony Handycam. So just fairly inexpensive cameras. The Canon's a little bit more pricier than the Sony, and I use 2 different tripods and. I get one, some of the videos you can see I have my palette laid out so that you can see the palette. And then I also have a photograph of the subject matter. So when I first started doing the videos, I didn't have that. I just had the one camera and I would put my palette up vertical so that you could see it. But it wasn't really true to how I worked. So I wanted to figure out, I thought, I need a camera that is on the palette and I need a camera that's on the painting. And then I also need the subject matter so that the viewer can see all 3 of those elements. So I've got the second camera, the Sony Handycam, and it points at the palette. And then I use Adobe Premiere Elements to combine everything up together and sync
to do your editing.
Do all my editing. So, but not a ton of equipment, not anything too seriously expensive or out of reach for. If people wanted to try making their own videos, it's fairly easy these days. The hardest part for me is learning the software. So.
Yeah, and there's so many different kind of software to use, but it can be pricey and it can be free. I just talked to my son-in-law. He's doing videos. He does a tree service, and imagine climbing trees with rigs and chainsaws and all of this. And he's shooting video and he's editing with the free version of DaVinci Resolve. It's a complicated piece of software, but it's like painting. To me, it's like painting. You don't have to learn every single thing. Learn the task at hand. Do that well. Don't worry about all the little other buttons on there. Learn the ones that says, okay, I want to cut here.
Yeah.
That's about it.
A lot of times the rest will fall into place before you know it. You'll know a lot about the program, and you didn't have to, you didn't have to consciously try to learn everything all at once. And that's exactly right. That's how painting is. I tell people, if you enjoy painting, if you get out there and start painting, you're going to learn things. It's inevitable. I mean, if you go out and paint every day for 2 years, you're going to be a heck of a better painter than you were 2 years ago. There's no. The only thing you have to apply yourself to is actually doing it, sitting in front of the easel or standing in front of the easel and doing it. And same thing with that software. It was like when I first got it, I didn't know what I was doing, and it was so frustrating sometimes. And I was working with an older computer that had slow processing times, and it was a chore. But just like anything, and this I think comes from kind of wading into things or just going through things at first in life and figuring out, okay, I'll learn how to do this. It just has to take time. Nothing just happens instantly. I mean, we have to put in the hours.
Oh, I totally agree with that. And I think a lot of times what I hear, especially when it comes to technology, electronics, that's what most people are talking about when they say technology. Painting's technology. These are all tools. But they'll say, well, I can't learn that. I'm not computer literate. And you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And I'm always saying, well, you're not a dog. you got this human mind here that's an amazing instrument it's a lot more malleable than we give ourselves credit for. You can learn anything if you set your mind to it.
Yep, absolutely.
I think with the videos, I think another aspect, artists don't have to do just training tutorials. I mean, a lot of your videos are not tutorials. You're recording the experience of painting a particular scene. And I think there's a lot of value to that.
The background noises. I think, there's something almost meditative about watching somebody paint. And when you don't have to turn on that analytical side of your brain and listen to the commentary, there's a different thing that happens. So you're just in that moment. And like you said, it's like you're looking over the shoulder, or you can almost become the painter. And there are ways, I'm a big visual learner, so I try to put stuff out there too for artists that, like me, can glean a lot from just watching. And sometimes the words can get in the way. I have to be careful when I'm teaching that I'm not overwhelming a student with the amount of verbal information that I'm coming up with as I'm teaching.
That's true. It can become like a fire hose, and you can't take a sip from a fire hose. It's hard.
Yeah, and you have to put yourself in the beginner's shoes. I think about 3 years ago, my wife and I started studying Kung Fu, and we were studying Silam Kung Fu, which is an ancient Chinese martial arts, and we came in as white belts, and we've got our instructor Han Shi is a 7th degree black belt, and so it was really interesting to be a beginner at something, and it helped me understand how little beginners know about a topic that is an art, because there's so much involved to it. So I was able to, I kept thinking, gosh, this guy must think I'm an idiot because he's telling me to do something with my hands or with my arms. And it's like, I can't even figure out, am I going right or am I going left? And but he was really good at kind of reeling it in and explaining the information to us at a very basic level. And I used that. That was right about the time that I was starting my videos. So I kind of used that knowledge of what it feels like to be a beginner, because I had forgotten almost, at this point. I've been painting for 22 years. And sometimes you forget how basic the information has to be at first for someone to be able to wrap their mind around it, and for it to be a catalyst for them to really progress in something.
I agree. I did a lot of human interaction design, and I've mentioned this before on the show with other people, but one of my principles was we forget what we didn't know. And that's really hard to master. We forget what we didn't know. And the other thing I always think about is Vince Lombardi, the winningest football coach. He had a lot of witticisms, and some of them were kind of crazy. But one of his rituals was with the football team was he before they go play a major game, he'd pick up a football, and here you got all these pro players, and he says, "Gentlemen, this is a football." Now, don't you think they knew what a football was? But see, he kept emphasizing the basics. And so that's a good reminder to us as a student. We don't know everything, and that's okay. And the instructor can have empathy, recognizing, okay, what is it that I forgot about being a student myself, and how can I help them?
Yeah, and it's so easy for our brains to want to not be a beginner. Our brain wants to say, no.
Well, our egos get involved, yeah.
Yeah, they want to do the flashy thing that we see the experienced person do, and we think that's easy. Look how easy they made that look. I want to do that. And so we try to jump the gun, and we try to, put the cart before the horse, and we're not thinking about the basics. There are so many analogies that I find between learning martial arts and teaching art. And, it's just like that. If I watch my instructor do a type of a move or something, it might be done with finesse and style and flourish. But really what I have to learn are the basic movements that create that before I ever try to put the style or the finesse on it. That comes from just doing the movement over and over and over again, because it eventually becomes second nature. And that's where style develops. And I think it's the same thing with painting. I think Robert Henry said, don't worry about originality. You couldn't lose it even if you tried. It's within you, and it'll come out over time. As you work, it comes out through the work. And I tell people, like with painting, its style is something you shouldn't even really concern yourself with for quite a while. And what'll happen is eventually you'll start to notice your style without you ever having to try to concoct a certain style. And in fact, when you try to fake a style, a lot of times that'll set you back a little bit because it might not be your style. You might be just trying to emulate somebody else's style.
There's really no room for just being a derivative painter. I don't.
Right.
I think it's a mistake to be derivative. I mean, it's okay to, I think, to learn from artists and observe what they do with their style, but we need to let our own calligraphy come through, our own handwriting come through.
Right, absolutely. And it's you can use it as a springboard. If you need something to jump off of, grab a hold of somebody you like and try to paint like them for a little while. But remember, you're not, like you said, there's no merit, there's no real artistic merit in doing something that's already been done. The painters before us were awesome. They did great paintings. We don't need to paint like them anymore. We need to find our own way. And I think to take impressionism somewhere is really important to think about as, it's kind of going on the bigger picture here. But this has always been in my mind. You look at what happened to art in the 70s and 80s, and I won't get into whether I think that art's good or not, but I think it was what it was. And art sort of branched out so far that it had nowhere to go. And then we saw this return back to the main tree that had been growing for hundreds of years. And now we're seeing some of the most fantastic advancements in representational painting, in particular in Impressionism, because Impressionism seems to be married with plein air painting. So we're seeing some styles now being developed, and we're seeing artists that are coming out now that are taking the torch from where Impressionism left off in the 20s and 30s and 40s before modernism came along, and sort of reigniting it and carrying it further on down the path. And I think that's such a noble pursuit. And that's why I always tell people, I mentioned it earlier, we can have fun when we're painting, but let's not pretend that it's not something important, that it's not something important. Let's focus on what we're doing as painters today. And, we owe it to all the great painters that went before us to really pour our heart and soul into pushing art down the line a little bit, down the field a little bit.
Do you take workshops?
Yeah, sometimes. I haven't really taken a lot of workshops. We've got, I've been doing these plein air shows, and we've got two elderly dogs and a couple cats. So traveling is always tricky, and I have to kind of pick and choose when I'm going to travel. And I've been saving a lot of my travel times for doing plein air shows, of course, before COVID and everything. But I'm always reading different artists' books and watching YouTube videos and listening to podcasts, and just trying to keep the wheels greased up a little bit. I think it's like I said, it's never too old to start. Well, you're never too old to stop either. I mean, you can keep learning. You can always glean new information from other artists. So.
This is fascinating, this whole idea of learning, and I look at your example of how you just threw yourself out there. You just got outside and started painting at a young age, and I think probably that's one of the best ways to learn is just to get out there and to do it like you did.
It is. Yep. I think especially if you're going to want to work from photographs. I work both from photographs and on location, but I always tell people, if you're going to eventually work from photographs, make sure you've worked from nature first, because our experience is so different. The things that our eyes pick up on when we're outside and just being immersed in a scene, it's a different experience than looking at a photograph on a screen in your studio. And, I'm not a big purist as far as plein air painting. I think however people get the job done is fine if you're not a plein air painter. But if you've taken time outside to look at the landscape and to think about how the colors work and how we see colors, and then you can bring that knowledge into the studio. I think painting outside is great for anybody that wants to learn how to paint, because you have the time constraint. So you're forced to learn how to make decisions quickly, which is important when you're painting. You're outside experiencing the subject matter. And I'm a big fan of N.C. Wyeth. And one thing that he taught, and he learned this from Howard Pyle, is that you need to know your subject intimately. If you're painting a fighter, maybe you should go train a little bit and learn about boxing. If you're painting a boxing match, or if you're painting a sword fight, this is from the age of illustration. If you're painting King Arthur, you might want to dress up in some armor and hold one of those big heavy swords so you know what it feels like. And so I think as a landscape painter, being outside is the best way to know what it feels like, and then that way you know how to paint that feeling into your work.
Yeah, some of your better motion picture actors and actresses, that's exactly what they do. They get into character way before production begins, studying the way they talk, how the character, if it's a fictional one, they're studying how they're going to represent that person. They lived the character. Yeah. So I think that's interesting. You get in there. That's your preparation. Basically, it's preparation.
You're building a toolbox to draw from. It's funny you mentioned that. There was an actor at the theater that I painted at, and I was talking with him, and he was playing all these bad guy roles. He had been known to play the evil villain. Yeah. And he told me he was going to have to stop playing those roles because it was starting to affect his psychology, or on a personal level, that he had put himself in the mind of an evil villain so often that he said he was going to have to switch and start playing the good guy for a while because just of that, he had immersed himself in the experience so much that it was starting to get to him, I guess.
Oh, I don't have that problem. I've never been an actor and never played one. So.
I don't think there's any downside to immersing yourself in nature over and over again. I can say that. So.
Yeah. See, now I have done that, and I love just to sit and to observe. Catalog the smells and the sights and the what you hear, if you can hear, and there's just so much to take in. And then when you commit it to a drawing, a sketch, even a photo, it's not as good doing it with a photo as far as memory goes, but it helps. In fact, one thing I've been experimenting with, and this, I got kind of shut down with COVID, so I've only been able to do this primarily in my backyard of late, but instead of just doing a reference photo, I like to film a 30-second to a minute loop. Just set the camera. So if you're doing wildflowers, you get the sway of the flowers and the sound of the wind and the sound of the birds. And I find painting from that is actually a lot of fun compared to just having a static photo on my monitor next to my canvas.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I've actually done that with wave painting. I was painting an ocean, and I just wanted the feel of the waves and the ebb and flow. And I've painted on location, ocean scenes on location, and that's how it is. You have to grab that experience and then mold it into what what part of it brings about the feeling that you want, and sort of a distillation process. So I think that makes a lot of sense to work with those videos, little video clips on in the studio. Good idea.
When we were talking about video, when you shoot video and you put it on YouTube, do you find that collectors are drawn to that as well? Has it helped market your paintings? I've never had a collector come out and say, I watched this video and it inspired me to buy this piece. But I do know that my collectors have watched my videos, and I imagine that any type of content that you put out there where you're inviting the collectors to experience a little bit of the artwork in a more intimate way than just buying the work and hanging it, so they have a little bit of a background story. I think that helps. And for me, it's working as an artist in this day and age, it's really about, how many different places can you put your work? And, I've got my website, kylebuckland.com. So from the Artful Souls page on YouTube, people can link to my website. From my website, I have a newsletter they can sign up for. The newsletter links back to my YouTube videos, which also, links to my Patreon page. And then, so it's this kind of, you're building this web of places and content for people to go to experience different angles and different aspects of your work. So I'm sure it has to help some to have collectors watch my videos. Well, you're everywhere, which is good. You're taking advantage of the tools that you have to get the word out there. Are you represented in galleries as well?
I am, yeah. And if you go on my website, I have a link that will take you to different galleries. And but I'm represented by a few galleries: Blow and Rock Frameworks and Gallery in North Carolina, the Proud Fox Gallery in Geneva, Illinois, and I've got Cabell Gallery in Lexington, Virginia has my work right now. So, and then also I've recently joined up with Hagen Fine Art in Charleston, South Carolina too. So, and all those links are on my website, kylebuckland.com. But yeah, I think, I'm a big fan of the gallery system. I know I've talked to artists and some people say, oh, they're a thing of the past. I say, no, because there's something nice about, I really, and I say this and people say, what percentage do they take? And I tell people, I enjoy paying galleries to sell my work because what it does is allows me to stay at the easel and focus on my painting. And, we all only have a certain amount of time. And so I want to be a behind the easel painting. And if somebody has, there's an art to selling paintings, and I appreciate that art, and I can recognize that, other people might be better at selling my art than I am at selling it. So, and I'm focused on painting it. So if I can pay somebody, and all my galleries, they work their butts off, they all deserve, every bit of their commission. And, that's what I look for in a gallery is an organization that, wants to mutual benefit for the artist and the gallery, and that they work and put the time in. And I've got no problem paying them their commission for doing that.
Yeah. I think there's something to be said for the experience for a collector, or even a non-collector like me. I was in Jackson, Wyoming, and I walked into a gallery for the very first time. Never been in an art gallery before. And of course, Jackson has several right there on the square. So I walked into one, and that's how I met Bill Anton and saw his painting, and it changed me. It was a life-changing experience. It helped me see, I want to do this. I want to eventually learn how to paint. And so,
I've always, ever since I was young, I enjoyed going to galleries and just seeing what was on the wall. I think I mentioned I grew up in Delaware, but moved here when I was 12. But we always go back to Delaware to visit family. And so ever since I started painting, it was always like that. My dad was like, well, there's a lot of art around where you grew up. And see, I didn't pay any attention to art when I was younger. So it didn't occur to me about the Philadelphia Museum of Art, the Barnes Foundation, all the galleries in New York. And, it was like, so then we made it a mission. Every time we'd go visit family, we'd designate one day to go to New York or to go to Philadelphia and to check out the galleries and the museum. So that was a big part of my education as an artist, was going into not only museums, but also to galleries and seeing quality art, up on the wall, and seeing that these paintings were for sale and were selling. I mean, that was inspiring. Like you said, it's like, oh, this is maybe something I could do, so.
Yeah, something that's relatively, well, at least to me, it's relatively new, is some of the more contemporary museums are in themselves an art gallery. I know I learned that here at the Booth Museum in Cartersville, Georgia, when they have special exhibits, that the artwork was actually for sale. And I thought, wow, that's
I was just there with the Plein Air Painters of the Southeast. They had a show there. I'm waiting to find out from the Plein Air Painters of the Southeast whether I'm a member or not. So it's quite a process to get in. But I've been invited to two of their paint outs, which is the first step. You have to become invited to two different paint outs. And so I've gone through those steps, and now COVID sort of put a halt on the process. Yeah. But I'm hoping that I'll be accepted as a member. That's a great group. But yeah, I was actually at the museum. My wife and I were there for the show at the booth.
You were? Were you there for the opening night?
Yep, and the little talk, the panel discussion.
Phil Stark and I were there. Yeah, and that's where I met T.J. Cunningham. He was there, but I didn't meet you. That's so unfortunate.
I didn't realize. We were just there, and you know how those things go. It's like you turn around and they're over with. But yeah, we went up there to catch the show, and actually TJ and we stayed at the same house when we were painting in Leapers Fork, Tennessee. Their Painter Southeast event there. So
and Blair Brown was there.
Great group of artists. Painted with them in Charleston too in March, right before the pandemic hit. It was sort of we packed up and went to Charleston. Everything was normal, and it was like by the time we got back, people were rushing out and buying, rubbing alcohol and toilet paper. So it was kind of a weird experience, but wonderful time getting to paint with that group of painters. They're just a really class act as far as their mission and their dedication to painting outside and to promoting professionalism in painting.
Yeah, they're a fantastic group. They're right up there with Plein Air Painters of America, which is on the more west side with Matt Smith, Ralph Oberg, and Dan Young and Skip Whitcomb and those guys. But it's really nice to have this in my backyard, to have these amazing artists like David Boyd and TJ Cunningham. Hopefully you'll be a part of that group as well. That'd be nice.
Yeah,
I'll come to that exhibit. I hope this COVID thing is over because I'm ready to go back.
Yeah. Well, they said, it's funny. Like they told me I would be invited to a couple events, and then there would be this. They would have to vote. They're very, and I understand it. They want to keep it prestigious for reasons that I completely understand.
Sure.
It's a high level of professionalism that they're pursuing there. And so they said, we'll get in touch with you after these couple things. And so, I finally reached out to David Boyd Jr., who's the president, and I said, how are things going up there? He said, well, we've had some, we haven't been able to do anything really or meet or anything. So, but we'll let you know as soon as possible. So I think that'll be on the horizon. And, either way, I'm just honored to have been invited to paint with them already. So, I looked up to these painters when I was younger, different painters, and I saw them doing these types of events. And it just was like, it was my dream, it's like, and now I'm living my dream. So I'm just so, I exist in a kind of a perpetual state of gratitude being able to do this for a living and get to meet these painters and to be able to paint with them. It's just a wonderful experience.
I think that's awesome. And I think you're going to go a long ways. You're relatively young in your career. And I think,
thank you. I appreciate it. I tell people I'm in it for the long haul. I mean, I don't see myself doing, spending much time in life not painting.
Well, it's been a real pleasure talking with you on The Artful Painter, and we'll provide links to the Artful Souls and your website. Yeah, it's. I feel like I have a kindred spirit here with what we're doing.
Definitely. Well, it's a pleasure to talk to you, and it's great to be able to interact. I've heard your voice. I've been listening to the podcast for quite some time now. I put it on in the studio when I'm doing stuff around the studio, and so it was a real pleasure and an honor to be here.
I think doing this interview with Kyle Buckland is a great way to wrap up the year 2020 for The Artful Painter. He was a thrill, a joy to talk with. I appreciate his enthusiasm, his inspirational story of how he got started at such a young age. And that deal with the library over the Carlson book, wasn't that great? I thought, wow, I don't think at that age I would have had the sense enough to know that is a classic, right? So anyway, I enjoyed that conversation with him. Be sure to check out his YouTube channel, The Artful Souls. There you'll get to see him paint those big canvases that he lugs out into the Virginia countryside. It is amazing to watch him do that. But anyhow, I am very grateful to Kyle for taking the time to speak with me. I think we could have talked for at least another hour or two easily, and perhaps he'll come back on the show again in some future episode, and we can continue our conversation. If not that, or at least another YouTube live stream here on The Artful Painter. The year 2020 has been quite a challenge, but one thing is for sure. You, the listener, have been extremely supportive despite all this difficulty. This year, I have 25 associate producers. These are people who have kindly given a generous donation to support The Artful Painter financially, and it has made a huge difference in the production value of this show. I am so grateful to each and every one of you. In fact, just this week, I got a new associate producer, and her name is Raquel Cox. Raquel, thank you so much for taking the time and having the generosity to give a contribution to The Artful Painter. It is very much appreciated. So as I mentioned, that brings the total of associate producers to 25 for the year 2020. I would like to take a moment one last time this year to acknowledge each of my associate producers. Okay? So here we go. And I'm sorry, I still have not learned how to pronounce everyone's name, so please bear with me, okay? So here's our list of associate producers. Cynthia Agakaklias, Kelly Bailey, Alan Bloom, John Bradham, John Calabrese, Beth Cole, Sandra Shook, Raquel Cox, Jeffrey Eichhoff, Scott Hegelson, Richard Husband, Priya Gore, Brent Kimber, Deborah Martin, David McNeil, Jonathan McPhillips, Jim McVicker, Margaret Miller, Debbie Mueller, Cheryl Petty, Jill Rufato, Serena Stratford, Frank Wash, Colleen White, Shirley Williams. Thank you. I am so grateful to each and every one of you. If you would like to join the growing ranks of the Artful Painter associate producers, please visit carlolson.tv and click on the Donate tab. So this year has been quite a doozy, hasn't it? It's been a challenge. You know, it brought a torrent of bad news and difficult circumstances for all. And because of that, it would be easy to dwell on the negatives, and it would be easy to miss the good that has happened. But indeed, a lot of good has happened. For me personally, this year saw incredible growth in the distribution of the Artful Painter. And I heard from many of you, your heartfelt stories, your encouragement, your kudos, all of those things. It was so encouraging to get. It made doing this podcast worthwhile. So thank you for all of your emails and messages of support. I'm very grateful to each of you. Now, in the coming weeks, I think what I'm going to do, if you don't mind, I'm going to take a little time off, not too much, maybe 2-3 weeks or so before I resume recording new shows. I need to paint a bit. You know, that's the one downside of doing this podcast is I spend so much time producing content that I don't get to paint very much. So I need to paint. Will you let me do that? Please, I'm begging you, let me paint. I know you will. So I'm going to take a little time off to paint, and then I'll be back. So the show's not going away. I'm just going to take just a few weeks off just so that I can recharge my batteries, do a little painting, and get back into the swing of things here. So before we close out, though, I want to give you a little bit of cowboy wisdom, okay? You know, many of the artists that I interview are Western artists, and one of the most notable to me was artist Bill Anton. I thoroughly enjoyed speaking to him this year. So when I think of cowboys, I think of Bill Anton. And I've always loved the way of the West, the American West. So I'm going to leave you with this little code of the West, a little bit of cowboy wisdom. Live each day with courage. Take pride in your work. Always finish what you start. Do what has to be done. Be tough, but fair. And when you make a promise, keep it. Ride for the brand. Talk less and say more. Remember that some things aren't for sale, and know where to draw the line. That brings us to the end of this edition of The Artful Painter. Thank you for listening. Happy painting trails to you all. I'll see you in the next edition of The Artful Painter.
Picture on the TV.